Welcome to Wirex Podcast. I'm your host, Lianna Adams, and today we're asking a big question. Can crypto fix wealth inequality, or is it just making the rich richer? Joining me is Stewart Rogers, Darketing Illuminator at CONFUSION&JOY and Editor-at-Large at Dataconomy, to break down whether blockchain is truly a game changer for financial freedom. Let's dive in.
Thanks very much for having me on, Lianna. It's wonderful to be here. Appreciate it.
Hi, Stuart. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. Let's start with your professional background. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. I'll try not to go back too far, but I started when I was 6. Basically, I was one of those annoying Wunder kids that, basically taught themselves how to program computers when I was, 6 or 7. Had my first video games out and I was making money when I was 12, which was wonderful. Then, I got into computers straight out of school and ran my first software house. Software house is what we used to call startups, but obviously startups is catchier. But I ran my first software house when I was 21. That was a disaster because I was 21. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did learn a lot. I was never one of those people who made a mistake and just went and did it again. I tried to learn from every mistake. And then from there, I went and learned about how to actually do sales and marketing and branding and all these things before returning to running more software houses, each of which was a great success after that. At the same time, I didn't really leave the video game world behind, but what I did do is I kept in touch with everybody, and I started a PlayStation news website that became one of the most popular PlayStation news websites in the world. That was all actually done for charity. All the money it made went to charity rather than into my pockets, which was what everyone was doing with blogging at the time. So I was kind of teaching myself to be an editor-in-chief and a journalist at the same time as running a software company. And then those two things all came together when I joined VentureBeat. VentureBeat, you may know, is one of the world's leading tech publications. With John Coetzee, who's at Forbes these days, we ran VB Insight, and we turned that into a 7-figure business in year 1, which was VentureBeat's research arm. And then that sort of saw me as a staff writer for VentureBeat. I then moved from there to Dataconomy, where I was editor-in-chief and now editor-at-large, and still contribute to many other publications. So I'm very blessed to have been around every tech ecosystem and been right on the bleeding edge of what's happening now and next and reporting on it.
Wow, that's an amazing journey, and it's so rich. Crypto was originally envisioned as a tool, right, for financial freedom and inclusion. Has it actually lived up to its promise, or has it just created a new elite? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thoughts on this are fairly contrarian, because I think that in the tech industry in general, first of all, the tech industry has a very high opinion of itself. We have to remember that we are less than 1% of the population of the world. So we can't all be saving the world every time we come out with a new piece of tech. And we also think of tech in very highfalutin ways. Blockchain has a lot of promise. So does what we're calling AI at the moment, although I think we're all going to laugh at ourselves about it being actually artificial intelligence in years to come. It's really not. As with NFTs, as with anything else, anything that we come up with in tech, the next thing will be AR smart glasses. We always think very highly of it. We always think it's going to save the world within 5 years or less. In fact, the amount of blockchain people I've heard say, "Oh, we're going to save the planet in 5 years with this token," it's crazy. It's crazy to me because people forget that technology, every single time, if it's going to become mainstream, i.e., if my mum is going to be able to use it, and let's remember, my mum always required me to program the VCR because she couldn't do it herself. But if everyone's going to use it, it's got to be as easy as the things that we're doing right now and better. In the case of blockchain, if we're thinking about it for payments, it's got to be as easy as a contactless card. If we're thinking about it as far as a new way to deliver solutions that are decentralized, that make sense, it's got to be better or faster or cheaper than the way we do it now. So I think there's a lot of promise in blockchain, but to make something from the tech world go mainstream still takes a generation sometimes too. And that's a big problem because, there's not enough money for that much runway to, see how it's all going to pan out.
Yeah, I really love your insights on this. I mean, it's definitely given it a new perspective, right? And some argue that, crypto empowers the unbanked, while others say it simply amplifies existing wealth disparities. Which side has more evidence to support their claim, you think?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of potential, especially for unbanked communities. And actually, it's funny that when we discussed doing this podcast, I just was writing an article about a new layer 1 blockchain called Right. It's called Right, but it's spelled RYT. And I was looking into that, and remember that I still get somewhere between 200 and 400 pitches a day from startups and projects that want me to write about them, and 99.99% of these are derivative. They already exist 1,500 times, or they're just not going to work. So for me to actually pick something up and want to write about it these days is quite rare. But I did pick up this story about Right because they've got a new layer 1 blockchain with a new consensus mechanism. It's called proof of majority. And whilst it's similar in some ways to the consensus mechanism used by XRP, it's sufficiently different. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to come up with a way that countries can implement a token for their whole populace, right? That's very different to a lot of the stuff we see on blockchain right now, because most of the blockchain projects that I see that have actually got some utility and aren't just there for speculation or they're a meme coin or whatever, you still need a PhD to open up a wallet in some cases. I've got one particular project I've been trying to get my head around. I remember, I was into everything that was happening in blockchain about a month after the original Satoshi white paper came out on Bitcoin, and even now we're still finding it difficult. Even the most technical of us who should know this inside out, we still find it difficult to even open up a wallet with some of these solutions, let alone actually use the token for the utility. So I think projects like Right, they've been looking at creating currency for example, for Pakistan, and they're talking to various other countries. And there's always been these other little projects that have actually worked quite well. I saw several years ago on a press tour in Tel Aviv that there was a very successful local token which was being used by all of the stores. And in fact, we just got notice yesterday that there's a Pavli coin in Estonia, just for the little district of Pavli that's near Tallinn, where that's going to be used exclusively to pay for goods and services. And Pavli, if you don't know, has the biggest vintage store you'll ever see in your life. It's fantastic. I've bought so much stuff from there. So these things are kind of interesting. Now, is there enough evidence to show that it's actually working? I think the jury is out on that. I think there's a lot of potential in both local and countrywide tokens, and there's been a lot of movement in those. But we're still waiting for the evidence that it actually works, to the point where we can actually scale this up and make it a global thing and make it easy enough for everyone to use. That's I think the biggest issue is, all of these projects have the opportunity to help those in countries where it's needed. But one issue is that a lot of blockchain projects come with a finite token to make sure that token has value. That's how we create value. Gold is only valuable because there's a finite amount of gold, for example. But that finite amount of tokens does pose an issue because, even if you take Bitcoin, which is the biggest of them all, and you take it and it's priced right now and you look at it completely objectively, there is not enough Bitcoin available, and there will never be enough Bitcoin available to cover the amount of fiat that's being moved around the world every day. So how do we change the world of fiat to be a world of decentralized tokens when there's not enough tokens? So I think there's still a lot that we have to figure out, and there's some other big issues, but I know that you're going to ask me about some other things later, so I'm going to hold back on those ones just now.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, I suppose, we are still in the early stage, right? And there's still a long way to go. But crypto has created billionaires overnight, yet millions remain financially excluded. Is this, a tech adoption curve issue, or is the system inherently flawed?
Yeah, I mean, it has created some millionaires and billionaires, but let's look objectively at that and say, well, whenever there is any watershed moment in technology, it's always pretty much the same people that are very well placed because they made money on the previous wave. Unfortunately, they generally tend to be white middle-aged guys that come out of Stanford. And therefore, guess what? They're the same people that take advantage of and speculate on the technology when it first comes out. And they're the ones that make even more money again, which is not great from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint. And it exacerbates the problem we have with, having other than white middle-aged men in the tech industry making all the money. And that's what, pretty much happened with blockchain. You had the same people who have the money, the understanding, and the position to speculate on this and make money out of it. And what we've seen is that, the vast majority of blockchain projects have been speculated on and used to make some money quick. There isn't really a lot of projects out there that actually has a utility and is being used for a utility. So, I still think we've got a very, very long way to go. And one of the things that I'm quite keen on saying to people, and I remember at Web Summit a couple of years in a row when I was moderating on the crypto stage, it gives me a lot of joy to tell a whole audience of blockchain fanatics to stop talking about blockchain. Please stop talking about it, because it's not about the technology. Like, think about Uber, for example. Did Uber run up to everybody and say, hey, look at my latest C# or Kotlin technology project? No, they didn't. They went and said, here, open this app, type in an address, press a button, we'll send a car to you, it will take you to the address, you can rate your driver, and we'll charge your credit card, and it'll be cheaper than a taxi. Right? That was what it was about. It's about utility and about being faster, especially in some places, although still not in Barcelona. It still takes an hour to get any kind of taxi there. But, faster and better and cheaper and safer. Those things are all drivers that drive everybody to want to use something. And that's one of the reasons that things like Uber and things like Netflix, have become so popular. That faster, better, cheaper, more accessible, makes me feel better about myself. Those are the drivers for people. The driver was never, look at my latest blockchain technology project. That's the only thing you say if you want to get VCs in, or people to give you money, right? That's what you say. You jump on the bandwagon, you say buzzwords. Lately it's been, hey, look at our new AI. Next it'll be, hey, look at our AR, technology.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking about the technology, then you're talking about it wrong. Tell me what it does. And that's what I really want to get across to blockchain people, is stop talking about blockchain. Show us solutions that actually are faster, better, cheaper, or make me feel like a better version of myself.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective, to look at to look at things, right? Because there has been a lot of talk around the tech, but sometimes even for me, I'm like, but what does it do? So yeah, that's so right. Because there are so many people who just focus on the tech, and I think we do need to change our language and the way we explain things. And and to your point, if it's not making my life any better, why should I use it, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah.
And
So
I
yeah.
have to tell you, Leanne, like, with my journalist hat on, if you look at my pitch box and look at the pitches I get every day, literally you could just replace the company name on the vast majority of them because they all are just buzzword, buzzword, buzzword. Well, we at company name are solving this buzzword, buzzword, buzzword with buzzword, buzzword.
We could make a drinking game.
Right, exactly. And then, I put my confusion and joy hat on, and we're doing like strategic work on things like community and ecosystem strategies with people, and sometimes we get blockchain people who come to us and say, hey, we've seen what you do, can you do it for us? And we'll look at their website, and their website is buzzword, 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 on-chain or off-chain, layer 1 or 2, buzzword, 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 buzzword. And again, it doesn't tell me what it actually does. In fact, there's so many blockchain projects that I look at, and we look at the websites, and you can't actually tell what they do. And that worries me.
Yes, I've come across quite a few of those websites, right? And for the life of me, let's just try to read the about, or let's just go to their docs. But it carries that same language, where it's just full of buzzwords, jargons, and to the point where sometimes you need to even look up the word, right?
Right, yeah. And don't even get me started on the amount of, the blockchain industry has hurt itself because, of course, for the first few years, there were so many scams or so many vaporware projects that never actually happened that the industry gave itself a bad name. So then when you go to a blockchain project website now, if there's no about page, no team page, no anything, like if you have to dig into the privacy statement or the terms and conditions of the site, if they've got them, to see if you can find an actual company name, already the heckles are going up, and you're thinking, just looks like a scam, and you bounce away.
Yeah, red flags all the way. So what's stopping crypto from being a true equalizer? Is it regulation, adoption barriers, or, do you think it's something deeper in human nature?
For me, I think it comes back to some of the things we've said already, which is blockchain projects need to focus on utility and focus on delivering real benefit to people. Certainly whenever I've done sort of studies or research across VCs and what VCs are looking for, most of them look at the team first and the team's background and history and experience. And then they're looking for trust and traction. And, you have to show that people can trust that this solution is real and it can do what you're saying it can do. VCs these days, especially now with the economy, globally, are looking for traction because they can't just bet on something that is pre-MVP or MVP anymore. They need to see that people actually cared enough about it to pay good money for it. So, I think those things are important. Adoption barriers, there still are way too many. We've got to make it easier. It has to be easier to use. There's no point in having something that has utility if it takes 20 minutes for a transaction to happen, or if it takes 20 minutes for everything to click into place, or if it's not as easy to use as the existing solution. If it's 5 times more difficult to use it, even if it's brilliant and genius and wonderful than the existing way we solved that problem, then that's a big issue. And that's one of the things VCs are looking at. But the smart VCs ask this question. They say to themselves, is this easier or better or cheaper than the way we currently solve this problem? If it's not, then it's probably not a good bet. I think the human nature part is very interesting. We need to, I think, change the language a little bit in the tech industry and stop talking about the tech and stop talking about it as being game-changing, about it being disruptive. That's a terrible word. Can't stand the word disruptive. We should do a drinking game around that. But we should start talking to people who we want to use these solutions in basic human language and stop making out that these things are disruptive or brand new or there's a huge amount of change, because people don't like change. People have been railing against AI for a while because, the number one question for most most people who are above the age of 10 years old is, will AI take my job? It's interesting when you talk to kids, actually. Kids are very smart. They don't think that AI will take their job. They're hoping it will, because they just want to go and sit on a beach in Bali and paint and make music, on a universal basic income. But for other people, the number one question is, will AI take my job? Well, that's not the question you should be asking. The question you should be asking, since AI is just a tool and blockchain is just a tool, it's not, will it take my job? It's who bought it and implemented it in the company I'm working for. If somebody smart and good bought it and implemented it, they probably bought it and implemented it to enhance your job, make your job more interesting, and take away all the menial tasks that you have to do so that you stay, because retention rates means low costs and better teams. If the person who bought the technology is one of those autocratic, people who love to just fire everyone and replace them with technology, well, they're not going to survive very long, and also that's the wrong approach. And so the human nature thing is, well, let's show people that this is actually just a tool for the job. It's better than the way we do it now, and let's talk to them in human terms. And then human nature won't rail against it because of all the potential change or worry.
Yeah, I love that. And I usually say that, technology is just a tool, and we, the humans, we need to do the work, right? We still need to do the work. And it doesn't mean like, it negates, the us doing the work, right? With technology. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And speaking of VCs, in traditional finance, we criticize the power of central banks, and in crypto, are we just replacing them with powerful whales and VC-backed projects?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We when we were doing our keynote for Confusion and Joy on Web3 and what we really think about Web3, we did a little bit of research, and we looked at all the data on, who on the token holders for Bitcoin, because that's the biggest and most used. What's the situation there? And we did this research because I remember reading very early on in the history of Bitcoin that actually, there was only a small amount of people who were holding most of the tokens. And then we looked at the numbers and crunched it all, and we found out that less than 0.01% of Bitcoin token holders hold 67% of the tokens, which sounds very much like our friends at Global Citizen did research on the fiat world, and of course, I think everyone knows that the top 0.5% of the world controls way more than half the wealth. It just sounds to me like capitalism all over again. And that's, I think, a big problem that we have in general. Like, regardless of whether we talk about fiat and central banks, or whether we talk about blockchain and decentralization, the sad fact is that those people who were in a position to speculate on and leverage the technology very early have most of the wealth, and that means we're still in exactly the same position as we are in the world, with this wide gap between the haves and the have-nots. So I think crypto, blockchain, it has the capability to level the playing field a bit, to maybe bring that gap between the haves and the have-nots down. But the unfortunate thing is that's not the current truth. It could be the truth in the future, and I really do hope we figure this out and we use blockchain for good, and do some good things with it. But right now, it's just not the case.
Yeah, and speaking about leveling the playing field, do DAOs really give power to the people, or are they just controlled by those who hold the most tokens?
DAOs could work. They don't currently work. There's a couple of reasons they don't currently work. There's quite a popular voting mechanism in most DAOs whereby you get through the first or second round of voting whether this thing should happen, but then the final round of voting goes to the ones that have the most tokens, which means then it's just the whales deciding whether things happen or not. And of course, the old problem comes back in of the people with the most tokens probably have a hidden agenda and probably are, doing all sorts of little background deals and left, right, and center. So, they'll decide which project or which thing happens in the DAO based on their own personal interests. And while there might be a lot of people voting, they don't have enough tokens to outvote the people who hold the most tokens. So that's one issue. So DAOs need to come up with better structures, better voting structures that are more balanced and even. The other problem with DAOs is they fall into the same problem as communities and social networks, which is the 99-1 rule, whereby 90% of people in any community or on any social media are just lurking. 9% of people are engaging, and 1% of people create. And if you want a good example of this, there's a lower league football team in the UK called Ebbsfleet, and they gave the football team to the fans. And basically, the fans every week get to decide, what's happening. Well, guess what? Most of the time, they got together and said, "Hey, should we manage the team this week?" "Oh no, we've got a manager. We'll let them do it." Okay. And that was every week. So basically nothing changed. And actually it was only the 1% of fans who were making that decision. They were making a decision to do the least possible because, communities, very rarely have very high engaged people who create a lot and have lots of two-way communication. That's because most communities aren't run properly. Even if you go into like a WhatsApp or Telegram group chat or Discord, you might, if you're on Discord, you might be a member of like 50 different servers. And the problem is when you first join, if there is not a high level of two-way value and exchange and people asking for your opinion and people responding in a respectful way and everyone's, really getting a lot from being in that community, you'll stick it on mute after a couple of days and you'll forget it's even there. So that's the problem with all communities, regardless whether they're DAOs or not. So I think DAOs can possibly do a great job, but you've got to treat it so that it's like a community where there's a lot of value going in all directions. Everyone's getting value. Everyone feels involved. Everyone feels engaged. And then when you have a voting mechanism, it can't be based upon whoever has the most tokens makes the final decision. And you need to reward people properly. It doesn't necessarily need to be monetary reward, but humans really crave recognition and recognition that they did a good thing or they came up with a great idea. That actually is more valuable for most people than money. So DAOs have to think very carefully about gamification. Gamification is not like in Revolut, where they send you a little notification. It says, send a friend to us. You could get up to 200 euros, but you actually only ever get 5 euros. And that's only if your friend does everything in time and does the 20 steps to qualify for one of you to win the sweepstake. That's not gamification. That's just bribery and bait and switch. Gamification is very nuanced. And actually, the startup industry could do a lot of good if it looked at the best mobile games and video games, because they understand how to do gamification in a very respectful way, where it's very good for them because maybe it increases their revenue. You've only got to look at the wild success of Monopoly Go and how respectful the gamification is in there. Monopoly Go makes you feel good playing it. It's really great to play, and they don't sort of pop up a thing every 2 seconds or run an ad every couple of moves to make as much money as possible. They're not really sort of screaming at you like some of the other games that are out there, but they're making an absolute fortune, like literally billions, using that game because they did the gamification perfectly well. And I think startup industry could learn a lot from the video game industry in that respect.
Wow, that's really interesting, and it's I think it'll be good to deep dive into these into the gaming industry, right? So what do you think needs to change in the crypto industry for it to genuinely close the wealth gap?
I think stop talking about blockchain, start talking about utility, what it actually does for people, make it ridiculously easy for people to use, as easy as the existing system, and offer real value. Comes back to the basic human drivers. Does this save me time? Does it save me money? Does it make me feel like a better version of myself, or does it give me some sort of red velvet rope treatment? Like, tap into those drivers, because that's what we're looking for. If we look at all the most successful solutions that have come out of the tech industry, putting aside the fact that some of them just got lucky, but the ones that really became successful tapped into one or two, three, or possibly all four of those drivers. That's what we've got to focus on. Blockchain is a technology, ergo you could call it a language. We don't run around telling everybody what programming language you use to create a solution. We show them what the problem is and why our solution is the way to deal with it. That's what we should focus on. Unfortunately, there's something that is stopping us all from being able to do this effectively. I know that when we were talking in the prep, you were going to ask me about fast forward 50 years. I think this links really nicely to that.
Yes. If we were to fast forward 50 years, do you think crypto will be remembered as a force for financial freedom, or a missed opportunity that only deepen inequality?
I think that depends on several factors. As I said before, like, technology becomes mainstream. It takes a generation to get there, because it takes that long to replace the previous technology and get everybody to understand that this is the best way to do it, and also to make it kind of like a black box solution that everyone can use. Now, there is a caveat to that. If your technology causes cultural change, and therefore would normally take a generation sometimes to become mainstream, the bigger issue is, does it change the status quo and upset people with power and money? Because if it does, they will do everything in their power to keep the status quo. Now, the problem with blockchain is that a lot of blockchain is intrinsically linked to the world of finance and money. And the world of finance and money is very happy with the status quo. In the same way that you've got a lot of people who are coming out with energy solutions that can power cities or possibly the entire planet for cents. How do you think the big energy companies feel about that? Or solutions that might cure every human ailment for free. How do you think the pharma industry would feel about that? What would they do to stop that from becoming the norm? And I might presuppose you can imagine. The problem we have is that because a lot of blockchain technologies are intrinsically linked to finance, because there's a lot of people with a lot of money and a lot of power in finance, they don't want to, until they can control and use the technology for themselves, they don't want anything to change. And that causes us an issue. Either you've got to have trillions in slush fund that buy everyone off to get them to come over to the new way, and get them all into the new system, or you might need 100 years and not 50. And I'm not sure any of the VCs have got enough money to bankroll 100 years of runway for everybody until it's actually mainstream, easy to use, and everyone can get in there, and we've satisfied the people who've got power and money now. So I don't want to be so super down on blockchain, because I'm not. I think it shows so much potential as long as we start showing real utility. And if we do it in a smart way that either stealthily changes things, or that it brings those people who want status quo to stay as it is on board straight away. So, I think it shows a lot of promise, but we have some pretty significant issues to solve.
Yeah, it just reminds me of, the seventh generation principle, right? Where, every decision that we make today, whether it's personal, communal, or societal, it has an impact on the well-being of the seventh generation yet to come. And, I've been holding some spaces, to just talk about this. And it's been a really interesting conversation to see where everyone is at and how they think about the future. And, before we wrap up, Stuart, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Other than thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to be on this podcast with you, and super appreciate all the questions. Fantastic questions, and gave me an opportunity to stand on a soapbox that I like to stand on every now and then.
That was an eye-opening chat, Stewart, and seriously, thank you so much for the insights. It was great.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, share, and let's keep the conversation going. I'm Lianna Adams, and this is Wirex Podcast. See you next time.